Hey the berries, it is June the 7th, which means it's patch day tomorrow, which is patch 12.11. There is another huge patch coming, so big meta swing coming again. If you watched the previous tier list 12.10, I think I was pretty damn accurate with the predictions of who was going to be particularly strong. Especially the brand and the Senna picks were to be expected to be pretty high. If you weren't aware, a few days after that tier list, Senna did get nerfed slightly, but she's still been doing generally pretty good. There are a couple things this patch which will affect the brand and the Senna and a few other champions, which you may have seen from the thumbnail. But the ones that I want you to have a look at here on terms of champion buffs, we've got Rakan getting buffed. His Q healing is actually going up. The W, which is the engage tool, is the cooldown's been reduced by 2 seconds, which is quite a decent amount. And his E, which is the double shield essentially, the double dash, that's getting buffed by quite a considerable amount. So the mana cost is getting reduced by a huge amount actually, and the shield amount is getting increased by a decent chunk as well. Rakan actually quite urgently needed a buff in the low ELOs in particular, which is what my tier list is focused on, which is basically between unranked and low plat. Rakan was not performing very well. He was one of the weakest engaged supports actually. I think probably putting him tier 3 previously was probably wrong. Should have probably put him in tier 4. But this buff definitely helps him out. Plus a couple of other things that we'll mention a little bit later on in terms of like items and things. We also have a Tom Kench buff coming through. He's also another tank support that hasn't been doing very well this patch. That's a passive on-hit damage increase. His Q when he lands that the heal goes up, and also the shield, because my head is blocking it, is getting buffed on the ultimate. So I still feel like he's going to be a pretty clunky champion to play. His win rate will go up slightly, but nothing too considerable still. I think his kit still is overall pretty bad. But I'll probably do some testing with him just to confirm that. But I don't think he's going to be performing too well. And obviously not many people have been playing support Tom Kench because he's not even in the support tab, as we know from the unranked to diamond series that I've been doing. Tarek's receiving quite a considerable buff once again, and one of those other champions that just isn't performing as well as they should be in solo queue. Well, for a really long time at least anyway for Tarek. His Q heal is getting buffed, so his max HP is more attributed to that. The mana cost on the Q is getting reduced to a flat amount 60, which could potentially make it so you don't necessarily have to do tier build on Tarek. I'm not 100% sure about that. He will be draining a mana a lot without tier, but that will require experimentation. The E cooldown, which is the stun, has gone down by 2 seconds, quite similar to Rakan's W, so that's a pretty nice buff. But the super interesting bit is the stun duration has gone up from 1.25 to 1.5 seconds, which doesn't sound like a huge amount, but it really is a decent amount, especially when you are putting your Bastion on another target. So there's 2 of those stuns coming out. Layering onto the same target doesn't increase the duration of the stun, but it just means that more targets are likely to be stunned for a longer period of time. Nothing really else in terms of champion buffs I really want to talk about there. In terms of support, you got a couple of the AD carry buffs in lane, such as the Caitlyn is getting quite a big buff, I would say, in the later game. So it's not really as much of an early game buff. It's more geared towards the later game. So her laning phase hasn't really been nerfed that much, but the later into the game she's more viable. Aphelios, well, no one really knows what he does really anyway, right? Not many people play Aphelios anyway between unranked to gold, at least anyway, but he's received a minor little buff there too. Samira has received a very minor buff there as well, so you might see Samira popping up in your games a little bit. But nothing too crazy in terms of AD carry changes. So let's have a look at the next slide. We've got champion nerfs, and this is where we're going to get into the real meat and potatoes of the patch for supports. We've got brand nerfs. We've got Senna slight nerf, yeah, like laning phase nerf, and we've got a Swain nerf. So Brand is probably the biggest thing, because Brand, I've always kind of said, is the best champion, full stop, to play in the lower rankings. Now, there is this nerf coming to him, but also there's an item which he always picks up is getting nerfed as well. We'll go through it all, but Brand is getting nerfed, passive damage being reduced from 3% to 2.5%. The detonate damage also receiving a little bit of a nerf as well. I think the nerfs will definitely affect Brand's win rate, but because Brand win rate in unranked to gold is so high anyway, I feel like he's still going to be pretty damn good. So overall, don't worry too much if you are a Brand player. And you should still be worried if you do see a Brand on the enemy team. Overall, yeah, he's just going to lose some win rate percentage, but he's still going to be pretty decent. Senna laning phase nerf. So the soul drop minion rate from minion kills is going up, if that's correct, up from 2% to 8%. So if you're having to last hit minions because your AD carry is not around, you will have potentially a couple more souls in a game. Not really a huge impact for support, but we might end up seeing a couple more Senna AD carries again. It's really weird how like every 4 to 6 months, like Senna AD carry becomes viable and then not viable and then viable, just purely because they keep changing the soul drop rate. It's really annoying. They can't seem to decide where it should be. They keep bouncing it around, so you expect to potentially see more Senna AD carries in your games. We've also got the Q slow going down from 20% to 15%, and the slow duration is being reduced as well. I'm assuming that Q slow is going to be going up per level. They haven't really made that clear, but yeah, it's a laning phase nerf for Senna. She's not going to be able to stick on to someone quite so much quite early on the laning phase. Overall, including the nerfs that she received over the hotfix nerf a few days after the patch, which did nerf her kind of like late game scaling damage a little bit with her passive. She's still kind of in the Brand basket of, yes, she will lose some win percent, but she's still going to be a decent champion. Like, she's still going to be viable. Brand's still going to be viable. So that's the good news, at least anyway. And these champions did need nerfing. Swain nerf. I know there's a few of you guys playing Swain in the in ranked. He is getting nerfed, generally pretty chunky nerfs across the board, particularly on the W damage. The percent AP scaling they're going down, including the minus 20 damage on the later levels. So W getting quite a massive nerf. Healing on the ulti being reduced slightly. So yeah, it's kind of a little nerf there for the Swain overall. Grievous wounds is getting nerfed as well, so the healing that Swain is losing there from his ultimate shouldn't really overall be impacted in the game, but the W damage is where you're going to be noticing where the damage does fall off quite a bit. Also, there's a Sona hotfix. There was a bug with Sona, so I'm not sure how that's going to affect her. Her win rate, Sona's win rate was already really good. This bug fix will increase her win rate. I don't know by how much, but it will be probably about 0.5%, I reckon, which is still a substantial amount considering how well she's been doing right now. So there was a bug where, if you're not familiar with Sona, she builds up passive stacks when she lands her Q, or when she heals an ally, or when she shields an ally, but then the shield gets depleted. So if the shield gets depleted, then you get like an extra passive stack for that, but that wasn't working properly with Sona in the last patch. So you'll be getting more passive stacks basically from shielding allies with your W, which, now I felt like the passive stack gain was still okay from last patch, so I don't know how much that's actually truly going to affect your passive gains rate, but it will go up. So it'll be interesting to see where Sona is at the in win rates in terms of the at the end of the patch. A lot of system buffs coming through. I'll try and run it down extremely quickly for you. Lethality across the board is generally being buffed. So Riot nerfed Assassins, and in 2 weeks we're like, yeah, no, let's revert that a little bit. they're so stupid. But yeah, so Senna actually, even though her laning phase did get affected, she's getting slightly buffed, ever so slightly buffed, with some of the lethality changes there. So for example, you got Eclipse, that's a pretty popular item on her anyway, so that's going to be an extra 4 lethality for her. You could potentially run something like the Serpent's Fang or something. I don't know if you are into taking any of those other lethality items, but the Eclipse is getting buffed, which is one of the first items or second item that you take on Senna, depending if you go Umbral Glaive. One of the biggest item changes here really in terms of support is right at the bottom, and that's the Knight's Vow. Knight's Vow wasn't an item really taken by many supports. The ability haste being increased from 10 to 20 makes it a little bit more lucrative. I think overall you're probably still going to be wanting to take the Thormail like second, but you could end up going like Knight's Vow third item on those champions like Rakan, or basically any tank support really. So that brings up a new item option now for tanks, as opposed to, okay, I bought my locket and then I bought my Thormail and I got nothing else to buy at that point, apart from maybe in some cases like the Abyssal Mask. It's, yeah, the tank items right now are pretty sad, honestly. But just trying to think, they did look to buff a couple of tank items there, but they're generally geared towards like the solo lane kind of tankiness. But once again, you know, I did briefly mention on Abyssal Mask, we should probably touch on that. The Abyssal Mask is getting buffed, so you will be reducing magic resistance on, well, a bigger number of magic resist debuff on enemy targets now. So Abyssal Mask is a little bit of a nicer option if your team is particularly like kind of stacked up on magic damage. That item will help as like a second or a third item in your build. Don't think there's really anything else to touch upon there in terms of items. Nope. Let's just go over to the next slide, where we have the system nerfs. So one of the biggest things that are changing this patch now is that the turret damage on the tier 1 turrets, which is the outer turrets, is being reduced slightly. So you may have noticed this, not like the previous patch, that you were taking a lot of damage, and that's going to be changed basically, so it should be slightly easier to tower dive. Everfrost, you might have been taking that on a couple of champions. That has been nerfed significantly from 1.5 seconds to 1 second. That's a huge nerf. So that could affect some off meta kind of picks where, you know, I was doing like Lissandra, Ari, Nico. Unfortunately, like that nerfs all of those kind of champions, those kind of fun champions that some people were potentially having fun with. So yeah, Everfrost, because that's basically because mid lane was benefiting it from too much. So yeah, Everfrost is a shame to see that nerfed. It does make some of those off meta picks slightly weaker. Then we've got the Liandry's one, so that's going to affect Brand, Zyra a tiny bit, but yeah, there's a double nerf hit on Brand basically. So he got nerfed on his passive, and now he's getting the Liandry's nerf. So just 2 nerfs, one direct, one indirect for Brand. Umbral Glaive is getting nerfed, but it's honestly kind of a joke. 35-second cooldown, which is like the little pink oracle's eye that pops up above your head. That goes from 35-second cooldown to a whopping 40-second cooldown. Shock. It's, yeah, the item's busted, so it's still going to be a really good item to pick up on Senna and Pike. It needs way more nerfing than that, honestly. That item as a support is kind of broken, and if you are ever playing against the Umbral Glaive support champion, you know how annoying that is. You put the wards down and then they're gone in the next 30 seconds just purely because of Umbral Glaive. And then they probably have an oracles as well, so they're getting to clear out more. It's just, it's stupid, that item. It really is. That needs adjusting completely. Nothing else really in terms of system nerfs to talk about, but there are some system adjustments. We did briefly touch up on the Grievous Wounds. That is, I mean, this probably could use its own segment entirely, but Grievous Wounds is getting nerfed again. So 25% healing on healing mitigation on things like the Bramble Vest, and then you've got, and the same with like the Oblivion Orb, and then you've got 40% Grievous Wounds on things like Thormail, Chemtech. So those items that were providing the Grievous Wounds debuff, they are getting some slight additional AD or AP ratios added. So for example, if we have a look at Morellonomicon, the AP on that's getting buffed. Chemtech's getting a whopping +5 AP. And same with the Oblivion Orb. So that affects a lot of support because we are the primary buyers generally of buying Grievous Wounds. So I'm not sure about this one in terms of how this is going to affect. I think healing is going to be way too high now. I think Soraka's win rate, for example, she was doing like okay. She was still like really good. So this is going to be indirect buff for like Soraka, Sona. So basically enchanters once again are now like stronger. It's kind of confusing, honestly. What's really going on right now? The balancing in terms of support is kind of whack. Enchanters are my favorite kind of supports to play, so really I shouldn't be complaining, but like in terms of balancing and stuff like that, this patch is like a huge question mark on Grievous Wounds. Riot has no idea what they're doing in terms of healing reduction. I think they're just like throwing darts at random numbers and just seeing what happens. This definitely feels like an experimentation phase, and we'll have to see what happens with it. But yeah, I think healing is just going to be like super high, like as it was before. They nerfed items like Death Dance and some of the champions healing across the board and stuff, but then they've also reduced Grievous Wounds. So I think we're kind of going to go back to square one, really. I don't understand the change, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up getting reverted next patch or in 2 patches time. Doesn't make sense. I won't rant on about that too much, but basically enchanters are now slightly stronger because of it. Chemtech, I think Thormail is still an overall decent item, and you will still want Grievous Wounds for a lot of situations because healing is still going to be pretty high, and reducing healing by 25 to 40% is still going to be a big thing. Chemtech second item, you're still going to want to buy that if there's healing on the enemy team. And generally, Ardent Censer and Staff of Flowing Water is just pretty bad still. So unless those items get buffed in the next couple of patches, which if there is someone from the Riot Balance team, and I swear there's someone from the Riot Balance team that watches my tier list, right? You need to buff Staff of Flowing Water or Ardent Censer. Please open up some additional options for support, because we're literally building the same thing every single game. We're going like Moonstone or Shreddiers into Chemtech into Wardstone, like every single game. It feels like there are some very rare cases where particularly like in high elo we're taking Michael's, but like the fact that Ardent Censer and Stuff Flowing Water is absolutely like garbage for such a long time and just like kind of dead items is just wrong and needs to be looked at. So thank you. Also, I appreciate you, Riot, for buffing like Knight's Vow, and I did notice that Zeke's had a slight minor armor buff, but those items still need kind of a little bit more loving, please. Thank you. It is kind of getting annoying building the same items every game. Minor note onto that in terms of items. Thormail is getting buffed, but the percent armor bonus damage thing is like it's still not going to be. You're going to be doing like a tiny marginal amount more damage as support. Is not even really worth talking about, honestly. And that does move us into the tier list. Let me get that up for you. There we go. So here we have the tier 5, bunch of random champions that you should never play. We move up into the tier 4 to the tier 3 bracket. So the main things here that have happened are, just to refresh your memory, is Tom Kench got buffed. He's still going to be tier 4. Swain got kind of nerfed. He's still kind of tier 4. I could maybe argue in Iron and Bronze, he's actually doing insanely well right now. I think that's why he did get nerfed slightly. So he would be maybe even potentially up to tier 2 in those ELOs. If you are in those ELOs, he might even still be around there. But he does fall off pretty damn heavy, like in silver plus. Okay, just to throw that out there. That's why he's in tier 4, because I wouldn't want you to play a champion like Swain, get used to it, and then find out he's absolutely like not viable. So just throwing that out there. I did add a couple of off-meta supports to the tier 4 list, just in case a few people wanted it. I did actually move Ashe and Misfortune up from tier 5 to tier 4. I don't want to talk about it. Ari and Anivia are now tier 4 kind of champions, so more than welcome to play those if you wish. I just realized Ari's on there twice. Ari was already on that tier list. Yeah, she's on there twice. She's that special to me. Tier 3, I've moved Yumi down from tier 2 to tier 3. She's doing... Yeah, she's just there. She's always annoying to play against, but honestly, she's not doing too hot in any ELO right now. She's doing okay, but it's just she's not making a huge massive impact like a lot of these champions in tier 3, honestly. One of the things that we did move up is the Vel'Koz. He's moved up from tier 4 to tier 3. He could potentially be tier 2. I was kind of like thinking about the idea there. His passive was probably the thing that I underrated the most in terms of this patch coming. So if I got anything wrong in the previous tier list, it was putting Vel'Koz potentially too low from in the tier 4. He should be around the tier 3, tier 2 mark. I'm a bit hesitant to shove him straight into tier 2, but do note, like, if you are wanting something different to play and you like your mages, then Vel'Koz is one to potentially have a keep your eye on. Any other changes there? We did move Rakan up and Taric up from tier 4 to tier 3. That kind of correlates with the buffs that they've received. I don't think they're going to be like ultra strong. They're definitely on the lower end of tier 3, so don't get too excited. Rakan does better in high ELO, like Diamond Master Plus. But generally Rakan and Taric have always kind of struggled, particularly in the unranked to low plat, which we're focusing on. So they're in low tier 3. Generally there's no correlation left to right in these tier lists, by the way, but just making it clear that the Rakan and Taric are on the lower end. Moving up to tier 2, we've moved Brand down to tier 2 from tier 1. I think he's going to be the strongest pick here in tier 2, and he could very easily slip into tier 1 still. I'm just being a little bit defensive on terms of like the outcome of his passive nerfs and the Leandri's nerfs, but Brand is still going to be a really, really good pick. As mentioned earlier, he's definitely on the higher end of this tier 2 for sure. A lot of classics there. Xerath actually I moved up from tier 3 to tier 2. I'm going to put him as like the lowest tier 2-ish. I know I haven't done like I said I haven't done left to right in terms of highest to lowest, but I kind of accidentally done that for this. But Xerath has been moved up from tier 3 to tier 2. He's just about entered tier 2. Renata's still very solid champion. She's been very solid support release. She's definitely on the upper end for sure. Not necessarily tier 1, but definitely stronger than the tier 3 stuff. So she's definitely like solid in that tier 2. Zillion and Blitzcrank have been doing, you know, decently still. And Lulu, once again, you only want to play that with a hyper carry and generally in gold plus, just to make that clear. Otherwise, she does fall into that kind of tier 3 area. Now let's have a look at the best supports that you can play in this patch. We have the Uwita, and it is changed slightly, honestly. Senna is still tier 1. That might be a little bit of a surprise, but because the Eclipse got buffed, it kind of offsets a little bit of the damage there. So yeah, Senna's still holding on at tier 1. I still think she's going to be a pretty decent pick if you're able to play her. Zyra actually tier 1 instead of Brand. I feel like yes, Leandri's is getting a minor nerf, but in terms of AP, I think she's going to be the strongest now. Not necessarily the strongest in terms of overall damage. Brand and Xerath, well, the Brand definitely will beat Zyra in the damage meters generally over the overall. Xerath might be slightly higher than Zyra, but what Zyra provides in terms of crowd control and the plants, and the easy application of debuff still. She's still up there as a decent tier 1. And, you know, because of the Grievous rune changes, again, technically being good for particularly the Sona and the Nami and the Soraka, those champions get to go up, well, stay up, should I say. I was thinking about putting Nami down to tier 2, but I think the Grievous runes indirectly helps her a lot, essentially. And then we've got, and Janna's actually been doing particularly well. I haven't really touched on her at all in the last couple of tier lists, but Janna's actually been doing particularly well right now. And, you know, the Sona also, her passive is getting bug fixed. So, yeah, nothing really else to add there. There's some familiar champions for sure in that tier 1 and tier 2 across the board. Tanks kind of struggling a little bit still in terms of making an impact. I did move, I don't know if I mentioned, I did move Leona into tier 3 from tier 2. The only kind of tank that really is interesting between unranked to plat is Blitzcrank. I think everyone knows that. I think Blitzcrank, you know, is the right pain in the ass to deal with. In terms of the second best tank to play is a coin toss between like the Nautilus and the Leona, really. I still probably wouldn't be over eager in playing Rakan. It's just one of those champions, like, if you need the AoE crowd control, it's a good option. So tanks are generally having a pretty tough time. Mages are still stable, are still doing just about okay. One more like percent damage nerf or like magic resist buffs for the enemy team could pose an issue for those champions. But the real winners so far are still enchanters. That there is like, it's crazy how much stronger they are in solo queue right now compared to everything else, honestly. Apart from maybe like the Senna. The Senna is, you could probably argue, is not really an enchanter. She's an enchanter like damage hybrid, but like she's doing really well at both like the healing side and the damage side. So she's like the only, her and Zyra are kind of like the only two kind of standout champions in terms of like the enchanters. So yeah, it's kind of strange really, because last season we were looking at like, you know, mages, enchanters kind of holding on, only a couple of enchanters being up there, and tanks generally being like a lot better. But because of pro play and Riot hating tanks apparently, yeah, it's just correlated that into solo queue quite harshly. So sorry if you like playing tanks. Yeah, you're still in for a bad time. I don't think things are going to improve for you guys anytime soon. But I hope you guys enjoy playing in the enchanters. Hope the tier list helps you out. I'll be streaming the new patch on Wednesday at twitch.tv/Bizzleberry. If you like these kind of guides and stuff, and the stuff that I've got on this channel, be sure to subscribe. A lot of you still aren't subscribed, which is very naughty. I will come find your PC and subscribe for you if you don't subscribe. And enjoy the rest of your day and have fun on the new patch. Bye guys. Bye berries. Bye.